You're sitting in a boardroom, surrounded by the very people who have always told you you're not enough. You're the youngest person in the room, the only woman in the room, and the only one who believes in your vision. And yet no one takes you seriously. They brush you off, dismiss your ideas, and tell you, you're just a dreamer. You've been fighting for years, proving yourself over and over again. But what if the only way to make them see you is to walk away and build something so undeniable that they have no choice but to acknowledge your power? This is the story of Jessica, 30-something, a woman who grew up in a family where she was always seen as second-rate. But what happens when you stop fighting for a seat at a table that doesn't want you? What happens when you decide to build your own empire, one that will not only rival the one that once rejected you but will leave them speechless in its wake? Today we dive into Jessica's journey, a story of ambition, betrayal, and the sweet taste of victory that only comes when you learn to trust yourself and your vision. When Jessica first stepped into the world of business, she didn't know much beyond what she'd been taught, that she was the other. The only daughter in a family of powerful men, she was told that the empire they were building, the one they had been building for generations, wasn't for her. But Jessica wasn't just any daughter. She had vision, ambition, and a drive that could never be shaken by the dismissive words of the men around her. Her father, a man of unwavering authority, made sure she knew where she stood. "You're not one of us, Jessica," he said, every word a brick in a wall she could never seem to break down. But while they saw a girl with no place in the boardroom, Jessica saw something different, a chance to carve out her own legacy. So she worked harder than anyone else in the room. She earned her MBA while her brothers took their places at the family business. She built her network, mastered the numbers, and understood the market better than the CFO himself. And yet, when the moment came to prove herself, when she brought her plans for the future of the company to the table, she was shot down. "You're emotional," her father told her, a smile barely hiding the contempt in his eyes. "That's not leadership. You'll never have the instinct we need." But what if she didn't need their approval? What if the path to greatness wasn't through their doors at all? Jessica made a choice. She walked away, quietly, determined to prove them wrong in the only way that mattered, by building something they could never take from her. She left behind the boardrooms, the expectations, and the family name. She started over, in a small apartment above a bakery. No fancy titles, no legacy to carry. Just her vision, and the determination to succeed on her own terms. And slowly, steadily, she built an empire. An empire that no one saw coming. But the world wouldn't remain unaware for long. The time would come when the name Jessica would ring out louder than the one she had been born into. And when that time came, the world would finally see the woman who had been underestimated her entire life. Not as a dreamer, but as a builder. But as success came to her, so did the ghosts of her past. The very people who had told her she wasn't enough would soon face the reality of just how much she had grown. And when Jessica's new company began to steal the very contracts her family had taken for granted, it was only a matter of time before the truth came crashing down. How would they react when they found out who had been silently outmaneuvering them all along? Join me as we walk through Jessica's journey, from the shadows of rejection to the spotlight of success, and learn the lessons she discovered along the way. When Jessica was growing up, she didn't dream of being the head of a family business or inheriting the empire her father had spent decades building. No, Jessica had always dreamed of making her own way, of proving that she was more than just a surname, more than just the daughter. But as she soon discovered, being a woman in a male-dominated industry, in a family that only saw men as true leaders, was never going to be easy. From the start, Jessica knew she was different. Her brothers were encouraged to lead projects, attend important meetings, and make the decisions that shaped the future of their family's business. Meanwhile, Jessica, she was given the women's tasks, the notes, the coffee, the administrative work. When she would try to speak up, her suggestions were brushed off with a smile and a "good idea, dear." But Jessica wasn't the type to back down. She worked harder than anyone else, determined to prove that she deserved to be taken seriously. There's one moment Jessica will never forget. It was during a critical board meeting. She had spent weeks preparing a proposal, putting together a plan that she believed could help the company thrive in an increasingly competitive market. She had carefully studied the numbers, analyzed market trends, and had a vision for the future. With her heart pounding, she shared her ideas. But as she spoke, she could feel the eyes of her father and her brothers on her, not with interest but with indifference. When she finished presenting, there was an uncomfortable silence. Then her father, without even glancing at her, slowly put down his pen and said, "You're not one of us, Jessica." The words felt like a slap to the face. He didn't even see the value in what she had shared. He simply dismissed her. "This business is for the men," he added, his voice cutting through the tension in the room. "You're emotional, Jessica. You care too much about how people feel, not enough about how deals get done." And just like that, her father, the man who had taught her everything about business, made her feel like she was invisible, like she was nothing more than a shadow of her brothers. Her passion, her work, everything she had done to prove herself, meant nothing. She was nothing more than a dreamer in their eyes. It wasn't just her father. Her brothers, too, brushed her off. During a meeting, her older brother Clark laughed at her proposal. "Who do you think you're impressing, Jessica? This isn't grad school. Smart homes. Green building. Do you think we're selling to Elon Musk?" He mocked her, and the rest of the room joined in, laughing behind their hands. But this wasn't just a moment of humiliation for Jessica. It was the moment that sparked something inside her. For the first time, she realized that if she ever wanted to be seen, she would have to stop begging for a seat at the table and build her own. Her father's words stung, but they also lit a fire within her, a fire that would push her to prove them all wrong. The mistakes we often make are judging others based on surface-level things, whether it's gender, appearance, or background. We're quick to overlook talent and potential because it doesn't fit the mold we're used to. But Jessica's story reminds us that true strength comes not from the labels others place on us, but from the drive to break through those labels and carve out our own path. Jessica's journey wasn't going to be easy. But what she didn't know yet was that this moment of rejection would be the very thing that pushed her to rise above it all and create something that no one, not even her family, could ignore. Jessica had spent years pushing herself harder than anyone else. She worked long nights, sacrificed her weekends, and gave every ounce of energy she had to the company. But no matter how hard she worked, it never seemed to be enough. She could see her brothers rising in the ranks, securing their places in the family business, while she remained in the shadows, overlooked and underappreciated. One day, after finishing a major project ahead of schedule and under budget, Jessica thought this might finally be her moment, the moment her efforts would be recognized. She walked into her boss's office, her heart racing with anticipation, ready to ask for the promotion and raise she knew she had earned. "Mr. Bennett, I've been thinking about my future here," she said, her voice steady, though a knot tightened in her stomach. "I believe I've proven myself, and I'd like to discuss the possibility of a promotion and a raise." Her boss looked at her with a bored expression, setting down the report he had been reading. For a moment, the silence between them felt like an eternity. Then, without even looking her in the eye, he spoke. "Jessica, you're doing great work, but you're not management material. It's just not the right fit for you." She blinked, stunned by the dismissive tone in his voice. "What do you mean?" "I've led projects, met every target, and exceeded expectations," she replied, trying to keep her voice calm. He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "It's not about the work you're doing. It's about something you can't teach. You don't have the instinct to lead. You're too focused on the details, too emotional. You're not cut out for the next step." It was like a punch to the gut. Everything she had poured into her work, every hour spent proving herself, meant nothing. She had always been the one to push harder to achieve more, but somehow she was always left behind. That was the moment, the breaking point. For the first time, Jessica realized that her constant striving, her endless dedication, would never be enough to change their minds. They didn't see her as capable, no matter how much she proved herself. The system was rigged, and no matter how many projects she completed or goals she exceeded, she would always be the one left behind. The promotion would never come. The respect she deserved would never come. It was clear, if she wanted to succeed, she would have to do it without them. Sometimes, the only way to change your situation is to stop waiting for others to recognize your worth. Waiting for validation, for someone else to give you a seat at the table, only keeps you stuck. Jessica's story teaches us that when we're overlooked, dismissed, or undervalued, the only real solution is to stand up, take control, and create the life we deserve. We must stop hoping for change and start being the change ourselves. Leaving her old job had been the hardest decision Jessica had ever made. But as soon as she stepped out the door, she felt a weight lift off her shoulders. She was free to finally build something of her own. No more waiting for validation. No more being told she wasn't enough. It was time to prove to herself that she was more than capable of creating her own success. But starting over wasn't easy. Jessica quickly realized that the world outside her family's company was a lot more challenging than she'd ever imagined. She had no cushy office, no family connections to back her up. All she had was a vision, and that was just the beginning. The first step was coming up with an idea. After months of brainstorming, Jessica decided she wanted to focus on a niche she knew was missing in the market: high-end eco-friendly homes that integrated smart technology. It wasn't just about building houses. It was about creating sustainable spaces that reflected the future of living. It was bold, innovative, and exactly the kind of vision her old company would have scoffed at. But now it was her chance to lead with something that felt true to who she was. The next challenge: money. Starting her own company meant leaving behind the security of a paycheck and diving into the unknown. Jessica didn't have a huge savings account or wealthy investors. She was using what little she had saved up, and hoping it would be enough to get her started. There were days when she barely scraped by, eating instant noodles and working late into the night just to make ends meet. Hiring the right people was another obstacle. Jessica couldn't afford to pay top salaries, so she had to find people who shared her vision, who believed in the idea enough to take a chance on it. Her first employee was a young designer she'd met at a networking event, someone who was passionate about sustainable design but had little experience in running a business. They were both learning as they went, figuring things out day by day. But despite the challenges, Jessica kept pushing forward. She spent her days researching the market, talking to potential clients, and perfecting her pitch. There were plenty of rejections, and for a while it felt like she was hitting wall after wall. The first few contracts were hard to come by. Most people weren't ready to take a chance on a new company. But Jessica kept knocking on doors. She believed in her vision even when no one else did. After Jessica decided to build her own business, it wasn't just about creating another company. It was about creating something truly unique. She wanted her company to stand for more than just profit. She wanted it to stand for a new vision, one that aligned with her values and the future she believed in. Jessica's journey into the business world had been filled with setbacks, but as she grew more confident, she realized that if she was going to compete with the giants, she had to offer something that no one else could. She knew that the market was shifting, and she was determined to be at the forefront of that change. Sustainability was becoming more than just a buzzword, it was becoming a necessity. As more and more consumers began to prioritize eco-friendly living, Jessica saw an opportunity. She noticed that while many companies were talking about sustainability, very few were actually integrating it into their products and services in a way that felt genuine. The trend was there, but it wasn't yet being fully embraced by the industry she had once been part of. So, Jessica set out to create a brand that wasn't just about greenwashing or following the latest trend. She wanted to design homes that would stand the test of time, not just in terms of durability, but in terms of sustainability. She didn't just want to build houses, she wanted to build the future. Her brand, Aller Designs, became synonymous with luxury that didn't cost the earth. Eco-friendly, energy-efficient homes with the latest in smart technology. Homes that didn't just look good but felt good because they were good for the planet. One of Jessica's first major projects was a modern home built entirely with sustainable materials, designed to function as an energy-efficient masterpiece. She worked with architects, designers, and engineers who shared her passion for the planet, and together they built something truly special. The home was a perfect example of what she envisioned: smart, sleek, and sustainable, blending cutting-edge technology with eco-conscious design. It was a showpiece that demonstrated exactly what her brand stood for. But getting the word out wasn't easy. Many potential clients were still hesitant about investing in green homes. They were used to the standard cookie-cutter designs and traditional building practices. But Jessica didn't shy away from the challenge. She doubled down on her marketing, showing people the long-term value of living in a sustainable home. She shared stories of families who had saved thousands of dollars on energy bills thanks to her designs, and the positive environmental impact they were making by choosing green alternatives. Her vision wasn't just about selling homes. It was about changing the way people thought about design and construction. And slowly but surely, her message began to resonate with the right people. The key to building a successful brand isn't just about following trends or trying to please everyone. It's about understanding your market deeply and knowing what real demand looks like. Jessica's ability to recognize the shift toward sustainability and her decision to lean into it was what set her apart. She didn't just chase the latest buzzwords. She built a brand around something that mattered, something that was truly needed. The lesson here is clear. A brand that connects with people's values will always stand out, because it resonates with authenticity. As Jessica's company began to grow, she couldn't help but notice something strange happening at her old workplace, the company she had worked so hard to be a part of for years. Where her own business was thriving, her father's empire, Lancaster & Sons, seemed to be losing its grip. First, it was subtle. A few missed opportunities here and there, a contract or two slipping through their fingers. But as the months went by, it became clear that Jessica's once untouchable family business was beginning to show cracks. They weren't keeping up with the times. While Aller Designs was attracting clients who valued sustainability and forward-thinking designs, Lancaster & Sons was still relying on its outdated model, sticking with what had worked for years but no longer appealed to the changing market. Jessica had always known that the world was evolving, that the demand for smarter, greener homes would grow as more people started to care about their environmental impact. But she also knew that her family's company, stuck in its old ways, wasn't equipped to adapt. They were still focused on luxury, traditional designs, and methods that no longer met the expectations of today's consumer. They hadn't embraced the future. They were too busy clinging to the past. The real turning point came when Jessica noticed that her old company was losing major bids. They were losing out on projects that they had once won without a second thought. Mid-sized developments, government contracts, luxury green projects. These were the kinds of projects that Jessica's new company had started to target, and slowly but surely, Aller Designs was winning them. One of the first major contracts Jessica won was a large-scale development project in the heart of the city, a project that Lancaster & Sons had been eyeing for months. Her company's proposal was sleek, modern, and built around the concept of sustainable luxury. While Lancaster & Sons stuck to their old, traditional designs, Jessica's team presented something fresh and relevant, something that matched the needs of a new generation of buyers. Aller Designs secured the deal, and the deal was a huge success. Jessica felt a quiet sense of triumph, but she also knew that her former company wasn't going to take this lying down. It wasn't just about one project or one deal. It was about the shift in the market that Lancaster & Sons had failed to notice. The competition was no longer just about who had the most experience or the biggest name. It was about who could innovate, who could keep up with the times, and who could meet the changing demands of clients. Her old company started scrambling to catch up. Their once polished image began to crack. They tried to mimic the marketing strategies Jessica had put into place, launching their own green initiatives and trying to highlight their sustainability efforts. But it was too late. Their efforts felt forced, like they were trying to copy something they didn't fully understand. Their brand no longer carried the weight it used to, and their clients began to notice. As Jessica's business continued to grow, she watched as her old company became more desperate. They tried to poach some of her employees, some of the top talent that had left them to join her, but even that move backfired. The best and brightest weren't interested in working for a company that refused to change, and more employees from Lancaster & Sons began reaching out to Jessica, looking for a fresh start. The key takeaway here is the importance of staying adaptable and open to change. Lancaster and Sons had the legacy, the name, and the experience, but they failed to evolve with the times. They didn't recognize the changing needs of their market, and because of that, they slowly lost their edge. In contrast, Jessica's ability to embrace innovation, to see what the future held and act on it, allowed her to build a company that not only competed with the old guard but surpassed it. Sticking to what you know might bring short-term success, but in the long run, refusing to change can be your downfall. The world is constantly shifting, and businesses must be willing to adapt if they want to stay relevant. As Jessica's journey unfolds, it's clear that her fight wasn't just against her family or her company. It was against everything that tried to hold her back. But as we see, overcoming these barriers is never easy. What do you think so far? How would you have reacted if you were in Jessica's shoes, fighting for recognition but constantly being dismissed? Drop a comment below and let us know your thoughts. We'd love to hear how this story resonates with you. Let's talk about the challenges we all face in pursuing our dreams and how we push forward despite the obstacles. After years of hard work, sleepless nights, and countless setbacks, Jessica's perseverance was starting to pay off. Allure Designs was no longer the underdog. It was a company in its prime, attracting big clients and landing major contracts that once seemed out of reach. The company had earned its place in the industry, and so had Jessica. The turning point came one chilly autumn afternoon when Jessica received a call that would forever change her life. It was from Forbes. They wanted to feature her as one of the top entrepreneurs to watch in the industry. The magazine had been following her success, and now they wanted to share her story with the world. It was a moment she had dreamt about for so long, but when it finally happened, Jessica could hardly believe it. As she stood in her office that day, looking at the email confirming the interview, she felt a rush of emotions. It was the validation she had craved all her life, not from her family, not from her old company, but from the world. They had finally seen what she was capable of, and it was clear her hard work had not been in vain. The Forbes article came out a few weeks later, and it wasn't just a small mention. It was a full feature, complete with details about how Jessica had built Allure Designs from the ground up, the risks she had taken, and the vision that had driven her every step of the way. The article called her a trailblazer in eco-luxury design, and described her as a force to be reckoned with in the industry. The recognition was overwhelming, but Jessica was ready for it. Soon, other major publications followed suit. Business Insider, Architectural Digest, and Inc. magazine all featured her. She was invited to speak at prestigious design conferences, and her social media following grew by thousands in just days. Invitations for interviews poured in, and Jessica was no longer just a businesswoman in her niche. She was becoming a household name. Her first big TV interview came from NBC's Today Show. Jessica sat across from the host, sharing her story of building a sustainable business and changing the face of luxury home design. The host was fascinated by her journey and asked her about the challenges she faced as a woman in a male-dominated industry. Jessica's response was simple but powerful. "I've never seen my gender as a barrier," she said, smiling. "I've only seen it as a reason to push harder and be better." The interview went viral. The next day, Allure Designs received calls from new investors, potential clients, and even competitors asking for advice. But for Jessica, the true reward wasn't the attention or the opportunities that came flooding in. It was the knowledge that she had built something meaningful, something that wasn't just about profit, but about creating a legacy that would inspire others. The biggest lesson here is that success doesn't come overnight. It comes from years of dedication, hard work, and the courage to stick with your vision, even when it seems like no one is listening. Jessica's journey wasn't about the instant recognition. It was about the quiet persistence that led to breakthroughs. When you chase your passion and don't give up, the world will eventually take notice. For Jessica, the recognition wasn't just an external validation of her success. It was a testament to the power of staying true to your vision, even when the road is long and the world seems indifferent. As Jessica's success continued to grow, so did the contrast between her new life and her old one. Allure Designs was now a formidable force in the industry, and Jessica had earned the respect of clients, investors, and peers alike. Yet, every so often, she couldn't help but notice the subtle reminders of her past. The family and friends who had once doubted her, dismissed her, or even flat out rejected her. They were still out there, and now they were starting to notice her too. It wasn't long before the phone calls started coming in. Some from old colleagues, others from family members. Most of them were congratulatory at first, though there was an underlying tone that Jessica could detect immediately. It was the same tone she'd heard her whole life. Polite, but with a hint of surprise, as though her success had come from sheer luck, or worse, as if they still didn't quite believe she deserved it. But there was one call she wasn't prepared for. The call that would force her to face everything she had worked so hard to leave behind. It was from her mother, who had kept a careful distance from Jessica's professional life, never quite supporting her the way Jessica had hoped. Their relationship had been strained for years, and as much as Jessica had longed for her mother's approval, she had stopped seeking it long ago. "Jessica," her mother said, her voice softer than usual, "I saw the article in Forbes and the interview on NBC. I'm proud of you. I never realized how far you'd come. Your father wants to see you. It's time to talk." It wasn't a simple invitation to catch up. It was a summons that would bring her face to face with the people who had once dismissed her. People who had, for years, told her she wasn't one of them, and that she would never measure up. Jessica hesitated but knew she had to go. This wasn't just about seeing her family. It was about confronting the ghosts of her past. It was time to face the truth, not just for them but for herself. The day of the meeting arrived, and Jessica walked into the house she once called home. The same house where she had been told she was too emotional or too ambitious to ever lead. Now, it felt like a stranger's house, a place she didn't belong anymore. But still, she stood tall as she entered the living room, where her father, brothers, and a few family friends were gathered. The room fell silent when she entered. No one spoke at first. Her father, the one who had always been the authority in this family, was seated by the fireplace, his hands clasped in front of him. He looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in years. His expression was unreadable, but there was something in his eyes that Jessica hadn't seen before. "Jessica," he began, his voice tentative, "you've made quite a name for yourself." His tone was no longer dismissive or mocking. It was almost respectful. But Jessica wasn't sure she wanted respect from him anymore. She wanted more than that. She wanted acknowledgement for the person she had become, not the girl they had always seen her as. She took a deep breath and looked at her father, her brothers, and the familiar faces around her. For the first time, she wasn't the one who needed validation. They were. "I have," she said quietly. "But I didn't do it for any of you. I did it for me. I proved to myself that I could build something real, without having to fit into your mold." The room was silent, the tension palpable. Her father shifted uncomfortably in his seat, avoiding her gaze. Clark, her older brother, who had always been the one to mock her ideas, didn't say a word. Ryan, her younger brother, glanced at her with a look that suggested he was trying to process this new version of Jessica, the one who didn't need their approval anymore. Finally, Jessica's mother spoke up. "You've changed, Jessica. We've all changed." She paused, her voice shaking. "But I was wrong. I see now that you weren't just a dreamer. You were building something. And I'm proud of you." It was the first time her mother had ever said those words. And while they didn't erase the years of disappointment, they gave Jessica something she hadn't realized she needed: closure. The lesson here is that success changes how others see you, but it doesn't change who you are. When you achieve your dreams, the people who once doubted you might start to reconsider their views. However, you can't let their change of heart define you. Jessica had spent years seeking approval from people who never believed in her, but when she stopped seeking it and started believing in herself, everything shifted. This moment with her family wasn't about winning them over. It was about Jessica finally understanding that her success didn't need to come with anyone else's approval. She had already proven to herself, and to the world, that she was capable. Now, it was time to leave the past behind and focus on the future she was building, one that no longer depended on the opinions of others. It had been years since Jessica stepped foot in her family's estate, the place where she once dreamed of fitting in, of earning their respect. But today, she wasn't the same woman who had left all those years ago. She had built a successful company, created her own legacy, and had found peace within herself. The invitation to the annual family reunion came just as she had begun to feel like she was moving forward. It wasn't an invitation she had been looking for, but something deep inside told her that it was time. Time to face the people who had once written her off, the ones who had told her she would never be good enough, the ones who made her feel small. It was a beautiful Sunday afternoon, the sun shining brightly as Jessica drove up the long, winding driveway toward the grand family estate. The familiar scent of roses in the garden greeted her as she parked her car. Only this time, there was no hesitation, no fear. She was no longer walking into this house as the little girl who had always been overlooked. She was walking in as a woman who had earned her place in the world, with or without their approval. As she entered the foyer, she could hear the laughter and chatter of family members, some she hadn't seen in years. The house was filled with people celebrating, but as soon as Jessica stepped through the door, everything went silent. It wasn't the silence of welcome. It was the kind of silence you feel when everyone's eyes are on you, waiting for you to prove yourself. She walked in slowly, with the quiet confidence of someone who no longer needed to prove anything to anyone. Her mother was the first to spot her and walked over with a smile, though it was tinged with sadness. "You look incredible," her mother said, her voice soft but filled with regret. Jessica smiled politely, but she knew there was more left unsaid. "Thank you," she replied, keeping her tone calm. "But I'm not here for compliments. Let's not pretend." The words hung in the air, unspoken but understood. There was no need for a facade anymore. Not for Jessica, not for her family. She didn't stop to chat with the cousins, the uncles, or the distant relatives. She made her way straight to the back patio, where her father stood alone, gazing out over the sprawling lawn. He didn't hear her approaching at first, but when he turned and saw her, his expression faltered. "Jessica," he said, his voice quieter than usual. "You came." "I did," she replied firmly, standing tall. She had come not for their approval but for something deeper, something she needed for herself. The conversation that followed was not what Jessica had expected. It wasn't a moment of reconciliation or a tearful apology. Instead, it was a quiet, almost uncomfortable acknowledgement of the space that had always existed between them. "You've made quite a name for yourself," her father said after a long pause. His words stiff, but perhaps tinged with something like admiration. "But we never thought it would be like this." Jessica took a deep breath, her mind steady. "I know you didn't, but you were wrong about me. I wasn't just a dreamer, and I wasn't just the girl who couldn't fit in. I built this without your help, and I've succeeded without needing your approval." Her father's eyes softened, but the unspoken tension still hung in the air between them. "Jessica," he started again, but she interrupted him. "I'm not here for apologies," she said, her voice calm but unwavering. "I'm not here to fix anything. I'm here because I've moved on, and I don't need to be accepted by you anymore. I don't need to prove anything to you. I've already done that." Her father didn't respond immediately. He simply stared at her, as if taking in the woman standing before him, the woman she had become. For once, there was no judgment in his eyes, only something that resembled recognition. But Jessica wasn't looking for closure from him anymore. She had found that on her own. "I'm not here to rescue you, Dad," she continued. "I've spent my whole life trying to earn your approval, but that's not my job anymore. I built something that's mine, and it doesn't need your blessing." With those final words, Jessica turned and walked back through the house, feeling a quiet sense of freedom. For the first time, she didn't feel like the outsider, the one who was never enough. She had finally shed that old skin. The truth isn't always easy to accept, especially when it forces us to confront uncomfortable realities about ourselves and the people we love. But sometimes the only way to move forward is by facing the past head-on, without allowing it to control your future. Jessica didn't need her family's approval anymore, but she needed to confront them to truly let go of the weight they had placed on her shoulders. This moment wasn't about revenge. It was about self-liberation. Jessica had already proved her worth to herself, and now she was free to step into the future she had created, one where her family's approval no longer dictated her happiness. As the years went by, Jessica continued to thrive, but not just in business. She thrived in life. Her company, Aller Designs, had expanded beyond her wildest dreams. What started as a small venture with just a handful of employees had grown into a global powerhouse, recognized for its innovation in sustainable luxury design. With offices opening in major cities worldwide, Jessica's brand had become a symbol of forward-thinking, eco-conscious living. But for Jessica, success was no longer measured by the number of contracts she signed or the headlines that featured her. It was measured by the life she had built, one that was truly her own. She had learned that it wasn't enough to be successful in her career. The real victory came when she found happiness in her personal life as well. After years of building walls, she had finally allowed herself to open up to new relationships and new possibilities. Jessica met someone who saw her for who she truly was, not the woman trying to prove herself, but the strong, independent woman who had already conquered everything she set out to do. His name was Daniel, a fellow entrepreneur who shared her passion for sustainability and design. They met during a business trip, and their connection was instant. What started as professional respect quickly blossomed into something deeper. Daniel didn't need to be told her story. He saw her strength and ambition and admired her for it. But more than that, he respected the woman she had become, not the woman she had to fight to be. Their relationship wasn't about competing or being better than one another. It was about building something together. For the first time, Jessica allowed herself to love fully without the fear of being overshadowed or dismissed. Daniel was her equal, her partner in every sense of the word. And as their relationship grew, Jessica began to envision a life that went beyond business, one where she could be the person she had always wanted to be, free from the constraints of her past. But it wasn't just her personal life that had flourished. Jessica had created a family, one made up of people who truly understood her, who celebrated her for who she was. Her team at Aller Designs wasn't just a group of employees. It was a close-knit family of passionate individuals who shared her vision and were committed to the same values. Together, they built a company culture that was supportive, inclusive, and empowering. Jessica knew she had created something special when she realized that her company wasn't just a place to work. It was a place to grow, to contribute, and to be part of something greater than themselves. As Jessica sat in her office overlooking the city, reflecting on the journey she had taken, she realized that she wasn't the same woman who had walked out of her family's house years ago. She was stronger, wiser, and more at peace than ever before. The battles she had fought were behind her, and in their place was a future she had created on her own terms. The true measure of success isn't just about how much you achieve or how much you prove to others. It's about the life you create for yourself, one where you are true to who you are and the values you believe in. Jessica's journey teaches us that life isn't about seeking revenge or holding on to past hurts. It's about moving forward, building the life you deserve, and surrounding yourself with people who appreciate and support you. The greatest success comes from within, not from what others think of you, but from how you see yourself and the peace you find in your own heart. Jessica's story reminds us that we all have the power to create our own path, no matter the obstacles in our way. And that path doesn't just lead to success, it leads to happiness, love, and fulfillment. Jessica stood by the large window of her office, looking out over the bustling city below. The skyline stretched out before her, a reflection of everything she had worked so hard to build. Aller Designs, now a global name in sustainable luxury, had grown into more than just a company. It was a testament to her strength, her vision, and her unwavering determination. But as she looked out over the city, Jessica wasn't smiling because of the business deals, the success, or the fame that had followed. She wasn't smiling because she had finally achieved everything her family had once told her she couldn't. No, she was smiling because she had found something far more valuable than accolades or recognition. She had found herself. It wasn't always easy. There were times when Jessica felt like giving up, times when the weight of the world seemed too heavy to bear. But every struggle, every setback had led her to this moment. The woman standing by the window was someone who had finally come into her own, someone who had learned that the true measure of success wasn't about pleasing others or proving anything to the world. It was about finding peace within yourself and living life on your own terms. In the distance, she saw the headquarters of Aller Designs, her creation, her legacy. And while it was the result of years of hard work and sacrifices, it wasn't just a symbol of professional achievement. It was a reminder that she had done it all on her own, without needing validation from anyone. She had built something real, something that would outlast any doubts, any fears, any obstacles that had once stood in her way. She took a deep breath and let it out slowly, feeling the weight of the years lift from her shoulders. Jessica had reached the pinnacle of her career, but more importantly, she had found the peace and freedom she had always sought. And that, she knew, was the true victory. The greatest victory in life isn't winning awards or achieving success in the eyes of others. The real victory is learning to live for yourself, to define your own path, and to find happiness not in external validation, but in your own growth and journey. Jessica's story teaches us that the most important battle is the one we fight within ourselves. The true reward comes when we stop seeking approval from others and start building lives that reflect who we truly are. Jessica had already proven she could succeed. Now, she had proven she could find peace, balance, and happiness, even after everything. That was the ultimate victory. Thank you so much for watching and following Jessica's incredible journey. Her story is a powerful reminder that no matter how many times we're told we're not enough, it's our perseverance, belief in ourselves, and the courage to walk away from what holds us back that leads to real success. What's your takeaway from this story? How do you relate to Jessica's challenges and triumphs? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you won't miss out on more inspiring stories like this. Thanks again for being part of this journey, and we'll see you in the next video.